Welcome to the True Crime Cafe. I'm Becky.
And I'm Angie, and you won't believe the case I have for you today. I have the case of the Austin yogurt shop murders.
Okay.
Jennifer Harbison and Eliza Thomas, both 17, were closing I Can't Believe It's Yogurt, just as they had done before. Also present were Jennifer's sister, Sarah, who was 15, and Amy Ayers, who was 13.
Okay.
The younger girls had been at a nearby mall and were getting a ride home from Jennifer. So they went to the shop to wait for her.
Okay.
All four girls were seen alive by witnesses just before 11 p.m. Shortly thereafter, a police officer saw smoke coming from the shop and called it in. Once the fire was extinguished, the bodies were discovered.
Okay.
All four had been found with their own clothing and shot in the back of the head. Three of the girls were stacked on top of each other while Amy was found by herself a little bit away from the others.
Okay.
Because some evidence was destroyed by the fire and the water used to put it out, the police had to rely on tips from the public. From the start, they believed someone entered the shop in order to rob it. Things went sideways and the girls were killed and the fire was started to cover it. Early in the investigation, Maurice Pierce, Forrest Wellborn, Robert Springsteen Jr., and Michael Scott were questioned by the police because they had been at the same mall as Sarah and Amy.
Okay.
To me, that's not a good enough reason.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're a teenager, early teens, like when I was in my early teens, every Friday night was spent at the mall.
Right. Especially when I started driving.
I mean, you're gonna see people.
Yeah. And what year did this take place?
December 6th, 1999.
Yeah, so that was my first year.
1991.
Okay, so that was my first year of college, and I was still at the mall every weekend.
Now, there were also reports that Maurice had a gun, the same caliber as the one used in the murders. However, the police were unable to connect the boys to the crime. Nearly 8 years would go by before police would announce an arrest.
Wow. Also, doesn't everybody in Texas have a gun? Isn't that kind of like required living for Texas?
But see, here's my thing. I can understand questioning somebody, but how many people, even the county, had the same caliber gun that was used in the murders? To me, that's just not solid enough. Now, if somebody had said they were at the same mall earlier, he had a gun, and he was seen entering the yogurt shop.
Yeah.
But the being at the same mall and owning a gun the same caliber to me just does not feel like it's enough to question.
And they had video surveillance back in 91, so if they caught him on surveillance around the back of the end, but I mean, I'm just saying.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
What they have right now is super circumstantial.
Them announcing an arrest after 8 years is where this case started getting really, really hinky for me. Okay. So on October 6th, 1999, so just shy of 8 years to the day. So 2 months shy of 8 years to the day. The police announced the arrest of Robert Springsteen Jr. and Michael Scott, two of the boys interviewed shortly after the murders.
Okay.
Maurice Pierce and Forrest Wellborn were also arrested, but a grand jury refused to indict them.
Why is that?
My guess is not enough evidence.
That would make sense.
On the other hand, Robert and Michael were both indicted on capital murder charges. After being interrogated, both boys confessed, implicating the other.
Okay.
The confessions came after many hours of interrogation. And when I say many hours, we're talking 20 hours over 2 days in the case of Michael Scott.
Wow.
The confessions were used at the trials and helped convict both men. Robert received the death penalty and Michael received 99 years.
Oh, wow.
This should have been the end of the case, right?
You would think.
You've got somebody convicted for the murders. The trial's been had. The grand jury said there wasn't enough to indict the other two. which to me was kind of weird because if you remember, it was Maurice who was reported to have been seen with a gun the same caliber, but yet the grand jury didn't indict him.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, this was not the end of the case.
Okay.
Both boys later recanted their confessions, saying they were coerced.
Well, 20 hours. Yeah, 20 hours.
I'm just saying, like, it happens, especially, I don't want to say especially with like teenagers and younger adults, but it does. Over the years, we have seen convicted persons who have had their pills granted because of coerced confessions.
Exactly. And as we've both seen on shows like Dateline and 48 Hours, 2020, all the good stuff, you've seen police are allowed to lie. So
they're allowed to lie.
If they said, oh, well, your buddy already told us, so you may as well just let us know.
They're allowed to lie. However, they are not allowed to do what happened in this case.
Oh, wow.
So one detective involved in the interrogations was transferred out of the department after allegedly coercing confessions in an unrelated case. A photo of an officer pointing a gun at Michael Scott's head during his interrogation was, so you know how they have cameras in the interrogation rooms and stuff. There was a still picture taken from that showed this detective pointing a gun at this teenager's head during this interrogation.
When I was a teenager, I had such a fear of guns, and just for whatever reason, that if someone had pointed a gun to my head, I would have said whatever they wanted.
Here's the thing. Even if you're not scared of guns, like I grew up around guns. My dad was in the Marine Corps. There was guns in our houses. We were taught, safe gun practices and all of that. But as a teenager, had I been in an interrogation room, even though I wasn't scared of guns, somebody pointing a gun at my head.
Well, especially police.
Oh, you're damn right. You damn right. I'm going to be like whatever y'all want me to say. I'm going to say,
especially when it's an authority figure like that.
Yeah. So in this case, this went far beyond the police officer lying and saying, hey, your buddy is in the next room and he told us everything.
Yeah.
Putting all the blame on you. So both convictions were, not surprisingly, overturned by the Court of Appeals. The court ruled that the confessions were improperly used at trial. And because the confessions implicated the other's role in the crime and neither boy testified, the defendants were denied their Sixth Amendment right to cross-examine witnesses.
Wow.
So in 2009, both defendants were ordered to be released pending new trials. So you got to think, they were arrested in 1999, and it was 10 years later when they were released pending new trials. So what a lot of people don't understand is the appeals process can take years and years.
Oh, yeah.
Not everybody who appeals their conviction is even granted like a hearing type thing in front of the Court of Appeals. Like some of them are just rejected outright. But convicted felons do have the right to appeal. That's the right. So, and it's not just like you can only appeal one time and that's it. So you ready for the next twist?
No, but tell me anyway.
The new trials were put on hold due to new DNA evidence not matching any of the suspects. There was DNA evidence found on the clothing of, I believe, one of the girls.
Yeah.
Maybe multiple girls. But we all know in 1999, in 1991, technology was not as advanced as it is.
No, it wasn't.
Or not as advanced as it was by 2009.
Right. And like, it didn't even start here. I think the real DNA being used in investigations, I think that started in the UK and then it came to the US. They had a head start. So, but yeah, even then, there was nowhere near as advanced as you said.
So as DNA technology advanced, the police were able to get a male-only profile from a lab in Virginia. That profile was then submitted to the National Center of Forensic Science at the University of Central Florida. which operates the US's YSTR database.
So what is YSTR?
So a YSTR is a short tandem repeat on the Y chromosome. It's often used in forensics, paternity, and genealogical DNA testing.
Okay.
It's taken specifically from the male Y chromosome, which is why the database only contains male samples.
Makes sense.
It contains over 29,000 male DNA samples used mainly for population research. So it's basically, it's in there. It's kind of like when you take part in a research study where it's your stuff is in there, but all of your personal information is redacted and like your number 902. Yeah. Samples can be submitted by police departments, the FBI, etc. So basically law enforcement. When it was submitted, the Austin PD got a hit and thought they would finally solve this crime.
Well, yeah, it'd be like any episode of Cold Justice or, the show that CeCe Moore did.
Mm-hmm. It's important to know that the YSTR does not confirm the identity of a single person. And it is possible for thousands and thousands of men to have the same male profile. Because remember, it's just taking the sample from the Y chromosome. So it's possible that every male in the same town could have that particular sample in their Y chromosome.
And so would it be like
DNA
relatives?
Is so complicated.
It is. So
this goes beyond being related to a person. Like this is thousands and thousands of men could have the same male profile.
Okay.
They submitted it. They got a hit. In most cases or in most databases. So like CODIS, NCMEC, all of that. If there's a hit, there's usually a name attached to it. And police get the name and then they can go arrest their suspect.
Well, yeah, because we've all seen the true crime shows where that happens.
So, however, police in this case were unable to obtain the identity of a man who matched their profile sample. The sample in the database was submitted by an FBI analyst. The FBI used a 1994 federal law that created a national forensics database and requires officials to protect the identities of anonymous donors whose DNA was submitted for population research.
That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life.
It is, but it's not. Basically, this database is used for nothing but population research. So, they want to determine how growing up in this town versus that town, how that compares, then they're going to look at this and say, okay, this population from this town all have this trait or characteristic.
Yes.
And because it's not a full DNA testing and sample, like they just pull the Y chromosome out.
Yeah.
So, basic biology, we get half our DNA from our mother, half our DNA from our father. So as a female, even though I don't exhibit the Y chromosome traits, they could actually be pulled from my DNA to trace back to my father. Because it's anonymous donations and it's population research, they have to redact all identifying information.
Okay, that makes more sense. I still don't like it.
I don't like it either. So as of today, the Austin Police Department has not been able to get the answers it needs. And because of the unknown DNA and the lack of physical evidence tying Robert and Michael to the crime, the DA's office finally announced that they would not be retried. I agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
If their DNA doesn't match and there is no physical evidence connecting them, like they didn't find their fingerprints there. You know what I'm saying? Like nothing matches. They don't have them on camera going in. They don't have an eyewitness. So
they just happen to be in the same time or on the same day.
Yeah. There were some theories, couple of theories that have floated around. There, well, more than a couple, but let's face it, anytime there's an unsolved crime, there's always conspiracy theories.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, all you have to do is like go look up true crime thing on Reddit, and like every single person has a different theory on some of them. And, you know, everything from basic realistic stuff to aliens.
So many of the original detectives and prosecutors steadfastly believe that the four boys originally arrested did actually commit the crime and think they got away with it. I get it. They don't want to be wrong, but at the same time, how can you explain the DNA that doesn't match any of those four boys?
Yeah, I agree. You can't argue with science.
No.
I mean, there's a 1% chance that science is going to be wrong. I mean, look at the platypus, you know, but
it's not even a 1% chance.
Yeah, in the case of DNA, it's your DNA.
Yeah. So a widely believed theory is there were two men sitting in a booth while the girls closed up the shop. Witnesses who were in the shop right before closing reported these two men sitting in a booth towards the back of the yogurt shop, and they were acting weird. Quote unquote weird.
Okay.
I'm not really sure how they were weird. I mean, they didn't elaborate, like,
yeah,
this person gave me creepy vibes, that person, you know?
Yeah, I know.
So one customer did report that when he was in line, one of the men offered to let him go in front of him. When the customer declined, the man got annoyed, ordered a soda, and then stalked over to the booth. So I'm not sure why he was mad.
That was weird.
Unless they were the last ones in the store, and he wanted him to go in front of them and leave so that he could rob the place, which is entirely possible. We don't know.
Yeah, as you were talking, I was kind of in the back of my mind, like, well, maybe he just wanted to be the last person there.
So crime scene photos seem to support this theory, as there is one booth that had not been restocked or have a chair on top of it. So in a lot of restaurants, like pizza joints, yogurt shops, that type stuff, when they clean up for the night, they flip the chairs over and put them on top of the table so that they can sweep and mop and whatever.
Yeah. And we do that at my house. I mean,
I don't know. My husband mops the floor.
Well, I mean, when I say we, I just mean my husband, because he's retired, so he just works for me now. So
yes. So unfortunately, these two men have never been identified.
Okay.
So there's evidence that kind of supports this. And you know, like when a crime happens, people automatically go, well, the weird guy who lives on the outskirts of town, you know, probably did it, even though there's not a shred of evidence. Last I researched on this case, it had not been solved yet. And my guess is it will probably not be solved if they can't get the DNA.
So can the police take their sample of the DNA and do the genealogy?
No, because it's, I mean, in most cases, so if you can run DNA through the system.
Yeah. Well, I meant like through ancestry, through gene.
But
I can't say genealogy.
But it doesn't mean that they're going to get a hit. If many states, if you haven't committed a felony or specific types of felonies, you're not going to be in the system. Back in 1999, genealogical databases and websites weren't as widely used as they are now. However, there has been a lot of controversy about police using those databases. I've never done like the 23andMe or whatever the DNA testing stuff is.
Yeah.
I've never done it. So I'm not exactly sure if you have the option to opt out of.
So I've done mine, and I had so much fun with it that my husband was like, well, I kind of want to do mine. I'm like, oh, good, because I ordered you a test. It'll be here like 3 days from now. And, you know, before he even asked, I was like, if I had to get his spit in his sleep, I was going to do it. I just want to know, like, you know, I was just curious. And I've always been fascinated with DNA and family history and all that kind of stuff. And there were a couple of surprises in mine. I found a cousin I didn't know I had. We text once a week or so. And it was a lot of fun. And when I uploaded to Ancestry, I did not see an option for let this be used in police or whatever. But there's something else called, I think it's called GEDmatch. And I uploaded it there. And there is an option on, I think it's GEDmatch, where you can toggle between I want to let the police have access or not. I toggled yes. And some of my friends were surprised to learn this, but I really value justice and seeing justice served. And if I have a family member who is a serial killer, I don't want them out there on the streets.
No, I wouldn't either. But the flip side of that is police use this database. They find somebody who is a relative match, meaning it's not the person, but so that person's DNA is now being used to target other people in his family. I have an issue with the police using them without the consent of the person who submitted it. Like, I'm all for, like, if I chose to submit my DNA and I chose to say, yes, police can use it, which I would. I wouldn't want it to be used in a way that would harm innocent members of my family.
Who, especially if they had not consented to having their familial, their relations used.
Yeah, because it's not even, not everybody is on the websites.
Yeah.
Like, say you and I were related. We're not, but say we were, and you submitted your DNA, told them that the police could use it. I didn't submit my DNA.
Right.
I didn't say police could use anything, but they get a hit with your DNA, but it's like a second cousin type that far removed. That then means that I, having never consented to anything, now have the police showing up at my door saying, hey, we matched your DNA. You didn't match my DNA. You matched my second cousin twice removed.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? So I think there has to be a line. There has to be. Like, if you consent for your DNA to be used and you've got, a whoever that's out there and is murdering people, to use your example, your DNA pops on the DNA sample that the police submit. But then in addition to that, there is other physical evidence that points to this person, then that's fine. It's not crossing the line. But if you're going after somebody based solely on a familial DNA match, to me, that's crossing the line.
Yeah. So when they get the DNA, and let's say that it was my second cousin twice removed, when they see the DNA, when they compare it to mine, they'll be able to tell by the numbers that line up when our DNA is compared. This could be a second uncle. This could be a second cousin twice removed. This could be a great grandparent. It would have a list of options. And then from there, they narrow it down.
I get that. But again, they look at your DNA and they say, okay, well, we can look at her cousin. We can look at her grandparent. We can do this. But none of those people have ever consented to having their DNA used by police. So I get it. Like, I've seen it where like a familial match does lead to the arrest of somebody, but typically there's other evidence that has already pointed to that person and they just needed that last little bit.
Yeah.
So, and like I said, unfortunately, I don't think this murder is ever going to be solved.
Which is sad.
It is. It's very sad, especially because the girls were so young.
Yeah.
I mean, Amy was only 13.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Like, the ones that I feel for the most are the parents of these girls. Like, to go this long without knowing what happened to your child, like,
especially with the highs and lows of, okay, we have someone, we're arresting them, they're behind bars, and then oh no, their DNA doesn't match, so we're going to let them go. Whereas you've already had how many years from in jail? Like close to a decade. So you have almost a decade of, okay, my daughter's killer is behind bars, and then oh no, he's back out on the street. They say it doesn't match, but it did. It's just heartbreak all over again. And the not knowing. I can't imagine the not knowing. So as you know, a member of my family was murdered back in the 2000s. And we knew from the start, there was a very brief period of time where we questioned who did it. But for most of us, we knew right away. And the police were able to prove it in a relatively short amount of time in the grand scheme of things. And everything was wrapped up in less than a year and a half, which to go from the murder date to the trial and the sentencing and everything in a year and a half, that's great because some of these cases drag out for years and years and years.
Mm-hmm.
So I cannot imagine they have to go to a trial all over again.
Mm-hmm. So I have found an update.
Okay.
As of August of 2022, so just a couple months ago, Texas congressman and a California congressman have wrote what they're calling the Homicide Victims Family Rights. What this allows is 3 years after a case has gone cold.
Okay.
The law allows loved ones to have a victim's federal case file reviewed. And a full investigation will use the latest technology and hopefully dig up new leads. ABC station KVUE spoke with Amy Ayers' family in 2021, so 30 years after he had been killed. This should have been solved 30 years ago. It's maddening to me that we are still having to do this, Angi Ayers said. Her brother said they're not giving up hope. It's 30 more years of not giving up, 30 years of trying. If it takes 30 more years, it takes 30 more years. We are not giving up. There will be resolution to this one way or another. So hopefully it'll pass.
I hope so. I hope it doesn't take them another 30 years. They deserve answers.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But so hopefully that legislation will pass and the case will get new eyes with new technology.
I hope so too. Thank you, Angie. This was very interesting.
You're very welcome. Stay caffeinated.
And join us next time for another cup of crime.